Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ainsley O'Connell. I'm glad to have you here today. I'll let these guys introduce themselves, and then we'll hop into some questions.
Yeah, hi, I'm Alex, co-founder of Flocabulary.
I'm Dan, co-founder of Thinkful.
Do you guys want to tell us what your companies do?
Oh, sure. So Flocabulary is sort of like today's Schoolhouse Rock. At least that's what we hope to be. And it's an online platform that we sell to schools and districts. We're currently in 20,000 schools around the world, and it's a recurring subscription program that schools use for student engagement and student achievement.
And we're an online school all about helping students learn programming for career advancement. So we help people go from beginner to job ready, learning a variety of new technologies. And our sort of core angle and our core thesis is that learning, whether it's online or offline, is all about human relationships. So all of our students work with professional developers who serve as mentors, and everyone has a one-on-one relationship with a mentor that we work with.
I wonder if you guys could shed some light on the fact that education is kind of known as this market that's notoriously difficult to crack. The buyers are really fragmented and pretty diverse. The sort of big players are pretty established. Do you think it's possible? How do startups come in and kind of disrupt or break into a market like education?
I don't know how you feel about this. K-12 is known as the worst of the worst. I envy you in your position with direct to consumers who have money. The grass is always greener, I know, but K-12 is difficult. There's a lot of bureaucracy. There's a long sales cycle, sometimes a year to 18 months to work with a big school district. So if you can imagine being a startup and bringing a product to market, having to wait 18 months for a sale, that's really tough. But the way that we've kind of figured it out is to, at its core, to be simple, to be clear with the buyer. When you have 10 people signing off on a purchase and you have 5 seconds to tell them what you do, simplicity, clarity, very clear value proposition is what has allowed us to make sales. And there are very few K-12 companies actually making sales to public school districts because of that fact. And I think the startups in the ed tech space that I talk to are often trying to disrupt everything all at once. It's probably true in many sectors that you can do that, but in education I think you have to chip away. There's a lot of kind of stasis going on and a lot of old-fashioned models. So we disrupt curriculum, and maybe someday we'll work on other aspects.
I think Alex correctly points to that we have very different adoption problems, going direct to consumer versus going through the schools. But I tend to think that in any market within education, disruption isn't exactly the right model, that instead it's more of an augmentation. And we've seen from our competitors or just from friends in the education world that there's two models that tend to work really well. One is either some kind of innovation that brings efficiency to schools. So if you're involved in school administration, you'll know that there's just stacks and stacks of paper that people are dealing with, and that just feels insane to anyone in our world. So as that disappears, there's going to be companies there that just let schools and higher education institutions run more efficiently. And the second one, which both of our companies are involved in, is just models that help people learn better. And that can be using education to bring something more engaging, using the internet to connect people from completely different places. There's a variety of models there, but that seems to be the second model of augmentation that is getting traction in a variety of markets.
What do you know now that you wish you had known when you started about how to kind of break in and get people to actually listen to what you have to offer?
I think if we could go back a couple of years, the core thing, and this maybe isn't as education specific, is we would just do less. I think we now offer 12 courses. We have over 200 mentors working with our students, and the complexity of all that is kind of mind-boggling. I think the core thing we should have focused on is one student with one specific goal. Because within education, you see an amazing diversity among your students and among your customers, and I'm sure you've seen this in the schools that you serve. But there's just tons of different types of students, and if you don't come to market with really good clarity on which student you're interested in, you end up trying to be sort of a Swiss Army knife, many solutions for many different types of students.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I also, nowadays in the startup world, feedback is the mantra, but we started back in 2004. I was listening to the panel earlier about accelerators. We actually started a year before the first accelerator appeared, and there was very little advice, and there was very little written about how to start a company back then, at least that I could find as a young entrepreneur in the Bay Area at that time. And feedback was not something that I thought about, and we were sort of like, oh, we know how to do this, let's make a product and sell it. Nowadays, we're much more feedback oriented, and we're testing every concept out and really gathering feedback from all the stakeholders in the education system. And so I think we would have probably been a little smarter about that.
You both entered areas of the education market that are pretty crowded. You're learning how to code. There are a ton of boot camps, curriculum. Scholastic, Pearson, you name it. There are a lot of companies already doing curriculum. How do you stand out? What makes what you offer different? And what do you think convinces people that they should buy it?
Yeah, so we use Rap to teach, and that's very different. That's, to use the term disruptive, I mean, that is disruptive in the sense that no one else is using Rap to teach, so that's worked to our advantage. But we also, I think early on, figured out that if we could focus on solving a problem that educators share, a collective, common problem, we would be onto something. And that's true for many businesses. If you can articulate that problem and then confirm that that problem is actually a real problem in your market, then you'll be successful. And so for us, it was student engagement is low. Kids have their heads on the desks in the classroom. So what can we do to bring life to the curriculum? And that, a lot of the Pearson, Houghton Mifflin textbooks are great, and they make a lot of money, but they're not interesting to all kids. So we wanted to find a way to make it interesting for those kids.
Can you give us an example of what Rap to Teach looks like in practice?
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't say that. I'm not a rapper, but I will give you a line that will elucidate this, hopefully. So we started out with SAT words because we realized at the time that kids study for the SAT by cramming flashcards, and it's not the most efficient way to learn. I had dozens of rap songs memorized. You go into a classroom, kids have dozens of rap songs memorized. So we said, what if we could take SAT vocabulary and put them in rap songs? So one such lyric, how many of you have heard the word limpid in a sentence this year? Limpid. One guy in the back? There's always that one guy. I'm impressed, sir. I really am. Limpid is a word that students are expected to learn for the SAT and the GRE, and it's a word that we never hear. So limpid means clear or not complicated, right? So I keep communication limpid, not too complex, clearer than a window that just got Windexed. All right? So this is like, thank you very much. I didn't write it, but I remember limpid, not too complex. And the human brain has this amazing ability to absorb that rhyme and that meter, and you'll remember that for a long time, I hope.
So our answer to how we sort of differentiate is the same as the founding insight, which was that mentorship is key in online learning. I think the one thing that's happened since we started, and that was happening when we were starting, is I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the MOOCs, Coursera, edX, etc. They've had 5 or 10 million people now sign up and start courses. And the thing that we do that sort of differentiates us from them or from some of the offline boot camps, if you're familiar with Dev Bootcamp or similar programs, is we're still all online. You can take our courses while you have a job. We're just focused on being the best part-time solution. But you're not learning alone. You're learning with a person. And when you ask someone what's the best education experience you've ever had, it usually goes back to, oh, I had this one teacher in high school who was amazing. I had this one professor in college, and that person changed my life. It's not about the content or even the subject area. It's about a person who did something for you. And so that's what we're seeking to bring to more people.
How do you find those mentors and sort of screen them, train them? Like, who are they?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've put a lot of effort into that over the last 2 or 2.5 years now. And they're all professionals, so they're all practicing in the field. And up front, there's an interview and a practice mentor session with someone on our team where we basically pretend to be a student and have them mentor us through a set of problems. And then we do sort of, with professionals who are busy and in high demand, it's really hard to get them to sit down for a week of training. So we do what we call sort of in-time training. So we have something for them that helps them prep for a first session with a student, and it gets emailed to them as soon as they get paired with their first student. So just before their first session, they're forced to review and sort of prep for that session. And so we just try to make it easy as possible in the product to have them prepared at all times.
The idea of blended learning, kind of combining online and offline modes, has been, a big topic for schools and for higher ed, continuing ed. Have you guys, found through your own product development that there is sort of an ideal model to go after, and when you're trying to combine, what happens online with what happens perhaps in an actual brick and mortar classroom?
Yeah, I mean, from talking to really great educators out there, I think what everyone wants is that the classroom can be used for collaboration and discussion and actual social interaction with other humans, and that technology can really be used for one-to-one. Sometimes flipped classroom works well where you're in the classroom all looking at your devices, as we are now, or that's what we do these days. But I think what we have learned is that education still works when people interact and collaborate. That's peer-to-peer learning and collaborative learning. So I think the ideal scenario is that there are devices and there is money to support one-to-one implementations where kids can be learning on their own at home, in study halls, whatever it is, and then actually collaborating with each other in the classroom. We are not there yet. And the sad thing is a lot of these devices are gathering dust in the closets of the school districts. So I think there's a lot beyond just software and technology. There's a lot of policy that needs to change, a lot of teacher development that needs to happen before we get there.
Yeah, our take on this is that different blends work for different students. The busy professional needs something that's just as efficient as possible. They shouldn't have to commute an extra hour to get to a classroom for something, because if you're spending 10 hours a week, 4 of those commuting is really a pretty big tax on the time that you can spend learning. Whereas if you're a student in an urban underserved population, being in a place where there's someone managing your behavior is actually really valuable. So the right blend there does require some offline component. So I think that there's a lot of different types of blends being tested today. And what I'm hoping we'll see over the next few years is a few different ones emerge for different types of students.
Kind of to your point around having those very different types of learners, I typically think of, a high school kid as being maybe a bit more disengaged than a professional who's looking to sort of advance their career. How do you think about keeping the particular student that you face motivated? What keeps them engaged, and how have you sort of translated that into your product design?
Well, I think we realized that kids outside of the classroom are interacting with all kinds of media around the clock, and that when they walk into the classroom, sometimes they're still using a pencil and paper, not even a pen, but a pencil. And so there's a huge disparity in the technology that they use inside and out. And so I think introducing technology, introducing popular culture can be really powerful if it's done well. There's a lot of gamification now in education, and sometimes the games don't really have the pedagogy behind them. Sometimes they do, but what we're trying to do is bring that pop culture element and bring music into the classroom to keep kids engaged. And I was a fairly good student, and we've worked with some of the best private schools as well as some of the worst and most struggling public schools. And I can tell you that kids of all backgrounds enjoy learning through music, right down to the kid who's cramming for the LSAT. So it's really, I think, a very human desire to have fun when you're learning, and that's what we try to keep in mind.
Yeah, we have a self-serving or a sort of self-selecting population, so our challenge is definitely a different one. But we similarly see that a lot of our students do struggle to commit the time, and we realized pretty early on that the problem is busy professionals are busy professionals, and when you go home, really what we're competing with is Netflix, not other online learning sites, but it's the person who wants to just get in bed and watch a movie. And I can relate to that. I mean, I do understand. I've signed up for lots of Coursera courses with great intentions as well. So what we saw really early on was this kind of binge learning pattern, where in the 2 days before your weekly scheduled mentor session, a student would just sort of complete 12 or 14 assignments and then do nothing for 5 days and then come back and do it again. And there's this social pressure that you have because you have a relationship with someone and you don't want to let them down. So what we've tried to focus on since we first saw that was how can we apply that pressure throughout the week to have you set better habits and not just cram for 2 days before your session.
If you think ahead to the future, when your own kids are maybe in your position or at high school age or continuing ed. What do you think will be the biggest thing that's different about their experience of education versus what you experienced?
Tough question. We were just chatting to each other up here. I don't know. I think, as I said earlier, I hope that the collaborative element never leaves education. So I'm just hoping that we can bring technology in a way that supports learning but doesn't supplant the human connection that's always been there.
Yeah, and I think there is this movement now to use technology to allow learning through exploration. I think this is something that wasn't as much around, but the thing that I wish was around 15 years ago was Minecraft, really. And if there are any Minecraft players out there, it's something that we see from our youngest students. It's a gateway for a lot of people to just a completely new world. And that kind of exploration right now is really, it's only sort of a gateway towards learning coding or learning other technical skills. But I think it can be applied much more broadly as we see things like Oculus go more mainstream.
I have one thing to add to that too. I run an entrepreneurship curriculum in Brooklyn called Big Idea Week, and one of the reasons that I started that was because the traditional classroom is still very much walled in. Kids go to school, they sit there for 8 hours, and they learn from one or two people, and then they go home. And so their world is actually fairly small in the traditional classroom. And what we were trying to do with Big Idea Week was bring company founders into the kids and to use a disruptive term, tear down the classroom walls. So I would hope that as education gets more global and as technology is used, that there's more community involvement, there's more connections, and really the horizons just get bigger, because I think those classrooms can be pretty small day after day, year after year.
As you guys look back on the last 12 months, kind of last question, and we'll open it up to audience questions. What are you sort of most proud about what your team has accomplished, and what are you looking forward to next year?
My favorite moments are what I think of as sort of the silent launch. It's when we launch either a new feature or a new course or a new product, and we don't try to make any noise about it. We just add it to our homepage, students start signing up, they start using it. And the best one of these was something that we've only announced to alumni of other courses, which was a new course to help students become freelance developers. So it's people with full-time jobs who have started learning technical skills to start finding clients and doing professional work and gaining real experience. And we've got our first cohort of that running right now, and no one else has a class like this. So we kind of launched that really, really quietly about 2 months ago. And it's going pretty well, so we'll do something bigger next year.
Yeah, I think my proudest moments often come from feedback from our schools, from both teachers and kids. We've had teachers email and say things like, I was about to quit teaching and then I found your songs as a way to connect with kids. So that's, not to be dramatic, but if we're saving a teacher, that's awesome. And kids do the same thing. Now I care about Paul Revere or whatever. That's the best.
Wonderful. Yeah, does anyone have questions they'd like to?
Hi, Natasha Green. I love the TED World Excellence feature, and personally, I'm going to TED podcast. So my question to both of you guys, because this is my quandary right now, is how do you really sell it, right? Do you sell it to the teachers who are going to be the early adopters, they're going to be the users, and you give them a certain unique value proposition? Or do you sell it to the district, enterprise model, go in with a payment, pricing plan, but they have a different UVP, right? They care about data, they care about numbers, while the teacher might care about impacting the holistic child. So what's the better way?
Ideally both. I mean, there are pain points in the building. Everyone has a different pain point. And so we have a teacher-only subscription plan. We have a parent plan. We have an enterprise plan for schools and districts. And I think trying to hedge your bets and figure out what's going to stick is a good plan. There is incredible word of mouth in K-12 education, as I'm sure there is in other realms of education. But teachers almost have a professional responsibility to share what's good, what they find out. So I would say make a great product and give it to teachers for free if you can, and they will spread the word for you. They'll be your marketers. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much, everyone.